Salve everybody and welcome to my course of NeoPsychology. Now, NeoPsychology is a term that I have coined in reference to a new age type of psychology. For the first episode of our little course here, I'm going to be talking about the prospect of contextual thinking. Now, in short, what this means is that there is a contextual thinking and then there's other types of thinking, and we're going to be diving into why it matters for psychology later. First, let's go to the first paragraph, which is critical thinking. By the way, if you want to see whatever this is, I'll put a link to a Google Docs document in the comments that will take you through the entire file of what I'm about to discuss. So the first part reads, critical thinking. Critical thinking is the basis of all forms of education and management within Western democratic society. But just because it is the basis doesn't mean it is also the standard. To be objective in your evaluation, regardless of the circumstances, requires an almost sociopathic personality. There may not be any emotional input or bias whatsoever. Only then, truth will come out. The problem with critical thinking is that although in concept it tells you to look at the facts, it does not tell you the path. However, the path should not be seen as a path, but rather more so as a puzzle, since each piece shapes the entirety. But making millions of connections can take a lot of time and energy that many simply do not have. So the question becomes, how do you choose where to go? How do you choose what to connect? How do you think contextually? Now the point of this is that you can think contextually, but also critically. And those are two very separate but still intertwined subjects, in the sense that they are connected through roads and pathways, but they aren't necessarily blended. There is just a moiety, a collaboration between the two that often happens in people's minds. Now we're going to be talking about the body compartmentalization model. I have developed a basic model based on the Mantanian human body symbolism, to compartmentalize every single sense and/or input. Organize yourself according to this model, and the connections will fall more clearly and efficiently. This is about algorithmically teaching yourself to sort of compartmentalize these things. So my compartmentalization goes by the brain being for methods, the left arm being for the goals, the right arm for energies, the heart for the soul/emotions, the stomach for instincts, left leg for the hows, and the right leg for the whys. The legs keep things moving. They are the critical thinking, the philosophy and the science, the why and the how. Contextual thinking, however, requires the brain. The methods. 1 + 1 = 2. Now that's method. Paradigming, a method of prediction within the culture and religion of Menta, for example, is based on calculating. The power of the future lies in our hands. We just have to learn the language of the map that leads us there. The map, of course, being the poetry of the universe, the patterns of reality. Now, recognizing these patterns. You must recognize patterns by looking for similarities, but sometimes also opposing forces. For example, a footprint does not look like a shoe, a river does not look like a desert. Yet these are all correlated in history and in the future. To recognize the intricate contradictions, you must see the world in the contrast it is. If there is light, there is dark. Every key has a hole. Every penis has a vagina. Every muon particle has a fifth plane of existence. Every George Carlin has a George Floyd, and every George Washington has a George Orwell. Chicken or the egg? No, chicken and the egg. Contextual thinking. So, in conclusion, contextual thinking is just as important as critical thinking. Account for all the paradigms, all the codes and all the factors. Dissect the world as if it were a frog in a 1960s American school laboratory. The biological marvel of a living organism compared to the marvelous majesty of a continuous exponentially inflating universe that seeks to understand itself through the consciousness of what, regardless of your religion, can only be described as divine being. The knowledge of eternity, hidden in the code. Now that's method. I'd even call it methodical. So why does this matter in NeoPsychology? Well, the reason why this matters in NeoPsychology is because we're going to be using a lot of contextual thinking, especially when we look into the history of certain aspects of psychology. Because you need to be able to use the arts that have been created in a way to convert back to whatever people were feeling at the time. If someone writes a story about tragedy, they're more likely to have experienced tragedy themselves. So in order to understand that, we need to understand what it means for tragedy to occur. So in order to do that, we need to calculate through using contextual thinking. If we just did critical thinking, we would just be asking yes or no questions, the factual, the objective. Contextual thinking opens up a whole new world of possibilities. So with that said, let's move on to the next topic, which will be, of course, the first video that isn't just this introductory video, which is going to be about shame and modesty.